Hello there, and welcome to the Impact Zone podcast. We are back again to talk more tea and wrestling shenanigans, and I want to talk about how you can sort of differentiate what kind of opportunity the platform that you're on sort of delivers to the fans, whether that's a sort of down your throat kind of push, or you're more so listening to the fans in what they want, because this is very important. Now, I've said this a few times that it sometimes does feel like there is a lack of planning sometimes with some things. And then there's other times where it feels like there's a definite, clear, and concise plan. And that is good when there is a definite, clear, and concise plan if you're paying attention and things like that. Sometimes, though, as well, it does feel like some of these things that are happening or whatever is going on in the space, like let's say with Joe Hendry, he was a big time star and he was great in the role that he was at. But I think fundamentally they didn't really use him correctly 100% of the time. Now, I don't know, he's been in the company for a long time, so it can be tough for them to find him challengers in TNA for him to face. But again, like, just putting him in random tag team matches or whatever else does not really help him. He is the major star. So he, like, even I said before, I think that there is that debate whether what show was it? Genesis, I think it was. No, it wasn't Genesis. When was the System versus the Hardys and all of that? I can't remember when they all fought, when the Nemeths effectively turned heel. I can't remember. But anyway, at that time, why was Joe in that match? Because, like I said, because perhaps they felt like, hey, this is the biggest match. There's no way that Joe can have a better match than this, so it has to end the show. Well, yeah, sure, okay. If you're saying that this is the biggest and best match, then logically it should perhaps go on last, and therefore Joe wouldn't be on last, the world title wouldn't be on last. So I don't think that that's a bad thing at some stages. I don't think you always have to end with your world title. They ended Bound for Glory with the tag team title win of the Hardys, so that again proved that something could be bigger than the world title picture for a specific match, because again it reflected history and it was something big and it was going to send the crowd home happy, and it was a big time match and whatever else, all those things. So it did deliver in that regard, in that sense. So again, I don't see why you couldn't have had Joe Hendry in a singles match of some description on the show before that cage match or what have you. So I just don't, like, maybe it's because of the card being so long as it was, or so packed as it was. But still, I don't know what, or maybe it's because again you couldn't find a fifth or sixth member or whatever it was for that team or whatever it was. So it was like, oh yeah, well, who else is going to be in this team, you know? And the effects of that match never really affected him. So it affected, Leon Slater, and it's affected Jeff and Matt Hardy and all of this sort of stuff. But, though Jeff wasn't in the match, but again, it sort of affected him, but still. So there again, you could have had Jeff in there, then again, you couldn't have had Jeff and Moose, but still, you could say that he has to wrestle 2 times or something, along with Moose wrestling 2 times. So I don't know. You could make something work, or you could find somebody else to put in there, or you could just cut down the numbers of people that are in the match, whatever. So, but still, I think a lot of the feuds that he got into this year. Or well, he didn't even get into that many feuds this year. Like, his title reign has been pretty short, but I also think that a lot of the programs that he has been in during his title reign have been pretty mid. Like, honestly, they haven't really given him a whole lot to kind of like sink his teeth into and do and really have this huge, ongoing. Like, the biggest one has been with Kaz. Like, so, but still, it's like you need more than just one other person and one other big feud that you're kind of going on with. You need all these other feuds. And it is very much like, well, in the first few months of your title reign, no one expects you to lose that belt. So it's like, well, obviously you're probably not going to lose it unless there is a bigger story there or something else is going on. But again, it's just one of those things of saying, you can't push people too hard. You need to listen to the crowd, but you also need to think, okay, how can we give somebody an opportunity to get into that space? Let's start looking at our roster and say, okay, we need to turn some of these other people heel, or we need to, push them into that position and say, okay, Eric Young, let's give you a title shot, even if it doesn't make 100% sense or whatever else. We need a rivalry for Joe. You're getting pretty hot right now. We haven't got a whole lot for you to do right now, or whatever else it is. And you could have done it a couple of times, actually, but still, you could still do that, and you could still put him in there and still do something with that, and that would have been a big contender for Joe to go up against in some ways, at least on one of the B shows. And then you go from there and go, okay, well, what's next, type thing. Where's next, like type thing. But yeah, you cannot just keep, kind of doing that as well. Like, you've got to listen to the crowd and be like, thinking like, okay, why are people starting to lose, kind of interest, in that regard? Not just pushing things, but also just saying, where are we at? Well, why didn't we have a title match for Joe? What here? Or why didn't we have a feud for him there? Or why weren't we building a feud underneath that for him? Like, if you're going to have that, have something affect him too, that leads into a match later down the road. Because then if you had Kazarian come out, or something like that, or whoever it was, come out and attack Joe and bloody him up or hurt him or whatever it was, then again, it makes more sense to say, okay, where are we at with that? Now we're seeing this feud build more again. Like, maybe people have gotten maybe a bit tired of it, but again, it's starting to percolate again, and you were thinking about like saying, oh, let's put Kaz in that rebellion match, or whatever it was. So it's like, well, I think that was like a bit after that, I think. But again, it doesn't really matter. But again, just saying, like, if you're thinking about what's in the future for Joe, it's like, well, what's next for him? You've got to have a plan, but you've also got to be able to pivot effectively. Like, they effectively pivoted when they realized that everyone was getting behind Joe, and they said, okay, let's put Joe into the main event picture and let's start pushing him, as a main event guy, as our top guy, like, and then they had a story and an idea to put him at the top, which is good. You need to be able to pivot and say, okay, now this is our plan, or at least this is our penciled in plan, and we're going to see where this goes. You need to give people opportunities to showcase themselves, and perhaps they're not going to 100% pull the trigger, but again, it's one of those things of saying, well, we saw the reaction, and the reaction was really good, so, you know what? We're going to have to think about pulling that trigger. We're going to have to think about putting this belt on him. Why, when, where, how, why is that going to happen? And some people complain that it didn't happen right away. But, you know, I think that there is a big thing of saying, you know, it needs to be the right place at the right time with the right story and the right build up and everything else. People need to see, you know, that win. You know, they need to see it happen. Not just we want to see it happen. No, this is the time that we need to see it happen, you know, type thing. And I kept comparing it to, you know, what's the name? Cody Rhodes is finishing his story where they waited a whole nother year to finish that story. And TNA only waited 6 months to finish that story. But yet everyone was complaining that they didn't finish it before they even really started it. Which, you know, I don't know. Yes, of course, Joe Hendry was very popular and whatnot, but he didn't really lose any popularity. And he was still going on his journey, you know. But, yeah, like, that's the thing. Like, you've got to have wrestlers that are on your roster. And if they're not getting over, then it's just like, well, at a certain point, what can we do with you? You know. But again, you can't just say, oh, you lose lol to people if they're there and it's like, oh, well, why isn't this person getting over? Well, because you haven't ever really given them any wins or any significant wins or really seen, you know, what you can do with them or say, okay, well, what else can we do with you? Let's find something else that we could do with you, or, you know, some other story, some other character, some other something that, you know, gives us something to work with, you know, or we really need you to be a really strong heel. Let's give you something else, and, you know, like, let's really make you into the guy or whatever else it is. Let's make you into the person that, you know, will be, you know, going up to face, you know, somebody like Santana or whoever it is that's going to be the next person, you know. So Santana's been brewing away there for a very long time, and I do agree in some ways it is like it's time to put that belt on him in many ways, because it is very much like, well, what else is there to do? But then it does become like, well, once you put the belt on him, you kind of have the same problem of saying, well, what are we going to do with you? Because you've kind of beaten everyone as it is. So that's where, again, you need to look at that roster and say, okay, we need to turn some people heel, or, like, especially early on, I think you can get away with just saying, hey, here's Kazarian, or here's Eric Young, here's some of our stalwart guys, you know, that have been around for a long time or whatever else, you know, kind of know what they're doing and whatnot, and have the experience, have the knowledge, and people will enjoy the matches and the feuds that are there, but they're just like early filler feuds that, you know, sort of get this person off the ground, get them going, so that, you know, then we can find other people that are, you know, bigger or more important, or not exactly, but again, like, they're going to be continually important for the next 5, 10, 15 years or whatever it is. Eric Young's not going to do that. He's going to retire soon. You know, Kazarian's not going to do that. He's going to retire soon. Like, so again, you've got to think, like, for the future, you know, you've got to think, you've got to listen to the fans when you bring somebody in and they don't have much of a reaction, you know. Why don't they have much of a reaction? Probably because they don't know who the fudge this person is. And if they don't have some sort of aura around them when they do come out, because, like, the first thing that happens is you get that music and you go, oh, whose music is this? If it's not instantly recognizable, basically, then it's very much like, okay, I've got no clue who this is. If it sounds very generic, again, then it's like, well, who the heck is this? It sounds like everyone else, well, not everyone else, but all the other generic, you know, theme songs and music and whatnot that sort of come out, you know. So everyone needs to have their own very unique theme song and presentation and everything. You can't just, like, if you're having a feud with two people and there's a feud over you're copying me or whatever else it is, that sort of thing, or you're trying to be too much like me or whatever else it is, like, type thing, then that could work. You could have some that are sort of having some parallels in their gear and in their presentation and things like that and whatnot. But again, you cannot have too much of that because otherwise they will blend together as well. You need to have them be different enough in some way, in some form, in some fashion that makes them, you know, something else or some other way that people can go, actually, I really like this person more, or they're trying to be, you know, better in this way, or trying to do something different in that way, or whatever it is. So it's got to, all these things have got to come together when you see the person, or when you see, like, especially when you get somebody with new music, like, or whatever it is. It's like, okay, this person has new music, like Kurt Angle when he went to TNA. He has new music, you know. So you've immediately got a big issue with that because it's like, you know, you need to condition fans to his new music and being like, oh, so this is Kurt Angle's, you know, new music. So it's got to sound similar to his old music, but not enough so that it's like, oh, we're going to get in trouble for this sounding too similar or whatever, you know. But again, you've got to have something for fans to go, oh, obviously this is Kurt Angle, or whatever else it is, or some sort of thing that it displays that it will be Kurt Angle. And, you know, you get that, like, oh, so this is going to be Kurt Angle's music, because if you see something of Kurt Angle on the screen or whatever, or just the name or whatever, then it's like, or the blue, white, and red, or whatever it is, that sort of thing, you know, like, again, presentation. You know, you're not just pushing somebody to say, let's push this person, or whatever else it is, or let's push this, you know, like, you're thinking about, like, the whole package of somebody. When you're looking at somebody, you're saying, okay, Santana, what's Santana all about? He's all about the streets, you know, he's all about, you know, he's a fighter, you know, all of this. His presentation, what does he do? He doesn't do anything like everyone else. He comes through the crowd. No one else does that. Like, people have done that in the past, but he's the only one in TNA that does that right now. So again, his presentation is different. He comes through the crowd, you know, so you get to see this guy of the people, the people's champion in some ways, whatever. You get those sort of correlations sort of thing. He, like, maybe he does have a, like, produced entrance in some ways, like you get the spotlight and that, but it does feel a lot more gritty. It doesn't feel like you're coming down the traditional ramp, you're doing the same thing that everyone else is doing, you're kind of doing something else, but it doesn't feel so special that it's like Shawn Michaels coming down the, you know, down the tightrope or whatever it was, or the zip line or whatever it was at WrestleMania. It doesn't feel like it's too much, or that you can't go bigger or something like that. It's just different presentation. You're just giving that person different presentation. Again, looking at who this person is, what kind of style that person is, what kind of music they're gonna have. You know, that theme music that he has is really, really good. It suits him pretty well. It actually helps as well that it sort of says his name and whatnot. But it seems like it has been very well produced for him. It doesn't seem like just a generic song or just something out of the blue. Like, that's what why Joe Hendry was so big and so over. His theme song was so catchy and so, like memorable and all of this sort of stuff, and so easy to sort of sing along with, and do all the things and clap and say Atlanta and Tokyo, America, Scotland and Mexico and all whatever, like all that stuff, we believe in Joe Hendry, da, 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 like singing along, like it was easy to remember, the bits and pieces that were in there, or at least like hum along with it. Same with like Fandango's music now, JDC's, like old music. But you know what I mean? People got into it and that got over. You need, like, when WWE has done this in the past, when somebody like Rusev has gotten over, or whoever, Zack Ryder, whoever it is, it doesn't matter. If somebody is naturally getting over with the crowd for some reason, they did this with Joe Hendry, but again, they need to keep doing that. They need to keep seeing if somebody's getting hot, hey, okay, cool, let's roll with that. And I know a lot of people like Santana and whatnot. I like Santana a lot as well, but I think that you need to also realize, that there is a level at which you cannot keep everyone happy. In some ways it is hard, but again, you need to keep trying that. But like, people will always find something to do, or to pick at, because like no one can bat 1,000, but you've always got to be trying to do the best of what you can. You've got to offer something that like, again, it shouldn't just be about the numbers and the dollars and the cents at the end of the day, but that is a very big and important, like, if you're not filling your arenas, but especially if you're only half filling your arenas or whatever else it is, and you're saying, oh man, we're losing money on these arenas left, right, and center, you need to listen to the fans in that regard. They're telling you, hey, we're just not interested, especially if you're charging however much you're charging for these seats or whatever it is, depends on what they are. But yeah, like, again, just, don't don't expect people to, for like, the WWE prices are absolutely insane. But you need to keep them, like, the prices of the tickets, somewhat viable. Like, if the people that want to buy front row or the first couple of rows or the meet and greets or whatever else it is type tickets, then they should be allowed to. But again, you shouldn't like gouge people out just to say, oh, well, we made an extra, couple of $1,000s. But if you are gouging people out, you should be doing it for a reason. You should be saying, okay, we know we've been gouging the fans a little bit. Like, this is something that WWE's been doing. We're not just gouging the fans for the sake of gouging the fans. I think WWE is. But that's neither here nor there, in my opinion, and we're not going to go too far deep into that. If you're going in TNA, if you're going to be like semi-gouging the fans, you need to be saying, hey, no, this is for a reason. What we want to do is try to net a bigger and better TV deal stroke streaming deal. And we need so much money to get to that point. Or we need so much money to book another big arena so that we can, or book, actually start using pyro again, or start doing this, or bring in this person, bring in this talent, or bring in that talent, and maybe we're going to cut this talent, cut that talent, cut whoever else it is, because hey, you know what? They've never really, even if we've given them opportunities, they've never really gotten over to the point where we think that they should, or whatever else it is, so they're not really making us enough money for us to really consider, keeping them around. Like, I do disagree with that in some regards, because it is like, well, especially with the younger guys, it's like, well, they haven't really got to that point yet where they can do that. So it's like, you need to keep these guys under contract, especially because, again, once somebody else gets a hold of some of these guys, it's really hard to get them back, and you know what, it happened with Santana, it happened with Callahan, But yeah, like it can be really difficult, especially because again, like there can be that distrust from the talent, and again, you can have that, sort of in the industry as well. Like if people are seeing, hey, you know, you're not really, trying to hold on to these people, or you're not really caring if you're holding on to these people, or some of these people at least. It's like, well, where's the loyalty again, sort of thing. Like, these are the people that are actually like bringing in the dollars and the cents for you. You can't just treat the wrestling like it's, this thing, this, mining thing that's gonna, bring you all these profits. You need to think about, like, how do we satisfy the fans, and how do we, like from a corporate perspective, you need to think like that. You need to, okay, how do we make this better? How do we expose more fans to this? How do we get more money out of this, but not, sacrifice what the product is? The product needs to have that air about it. It needs to be the land of opportunity. Talent need to be able to be like, nah, if I go there, and it is in many ways, but again, like if I go there and if I put in the effort and if I, lace up my boots and do the best that I can, I will get over and I will, make something of myself there. And there's a difference again between somebody having a bit of a chip on their shoulder and going, okay, now I'm going to get to work and I'm going to prove everyone wrong and I'm going to be the best and I'm going to, make TNA the best as well along with me. There's a difference between that and somebody who's just an asshole who goes out there and says, well, you didn't know how to use me at all. There's a difference between people going, you didn't know how to use me, and then going out to try to prove how they didn't know how to use them, and knowing, okay, I've got to work with people, but I've got to fucking try to get there myself at some point, because that's, me showing, hey, I did it after all this time, or whatever it was, But again, the other people who are like, just like, no, I'm in it for myself now, and I'll, step over everyone to, crush the people that are below them, despite, having been crushed by somebody else who came in and, crushed them and said, oh, how dare that person do that, crush me while I'm not, while I'm just on my way up, You're crushing the people while you're that are on the way up. There's a difference between people that are there and that are going to say, okay, I'm going to do the job to somebody and help get them over, because like, even if like people may remember some of this stuff that I've done in my career and may remember that TNA gave me a big opportunity here, or whatever it was, in that role that I've never really got, or whatever it was, in WWE or here or there or wherever it was, hey, well, I still need to friggin' well be, willing to move on at the right time and say, okay, I'm going to step out of the way because there's other young guys and cats and whatever and dogs, whatever, here that, deserve to be built up and be the next face of the company. And that's the thing about being the face of the company. It's like, it's a big, big role. And I was talking about that a long time ago, and I was saying, like, guys, if you're not willing to be better and do more than the guy that's at the top, or at least do the exact same amount of work, then you don't belong at the top, because you need to put in the effort. And when you win that belt, it's not like you can sit back and relax. You need to get your ass together. There's no time for anything, because now you need to work even harder. The real work starts now, sort of thing. You need to get out there. You need to be annoying TV and radio stations and all these other people and magazine writers and all of this other stuff and podcasters and things like that, and saying, hey, interview. Hey, interview me. I just won this belt, or I'm just about to go into this big match with this person and this thing, or whatever it is, or I'm coming over here to your town for this show, and and things like that. You need to get your stuff out there so that, you're not just selling for yourself, you're selling for the company, and you're getting everything going for everyone, not just yourself, but the guys that are coming after you, and then setting that example and saying, hey, this is what it takes to be the top guy, you know. So again, like it's a multifaceted approach in many ways, but again, and they do have this approach in many ways, but again, it's always like keeping that balance and keeping the things going and keeping the audience satisfied, sort of thing. You can't just have a champion there who is champion and, like, yeah, Joe defended it a bunch on TV and whatnot, and defended it a bunch in oh no, he only really defended it once in NXT, but whatever. He defended it against a bunch of NXT people in TNA as well. And that is a bit of the problem as well. Like, you're here also giving these opportunities to all these people from NXT. And if you know how and where and when to kind of do that, then that's fine. If, you know, Ethan Page had come in and said, oh yeah, I'm challenging Joe Hendry, whatever. That's cool, whatever. That's fine. Because if he's challenging him at Under Siege, then that makes it better, because now you're not, like, having two people trying to challenge him at the same time, sort of thing, and then you're not having to have this other match at Under Siege with them tagging together and they have a vested interest in beating each other. It's like, well, sort of thing, like, or letting the other one get more beaten up, sort of thing, because now that next month or whatever it is, they're going to be opponents or whatever it is, sort of thing. So it's like, especially when those things are on pay-per-view, it is very much the thing of saying, well, you know, just give us, you know, Ethan versus Hendry at Under Siege or whatever it is, you know, and then give us, you know, Kazarian versus Hendry at Rebellion, you know, instead of giving us a triple threat. You know, I know why they kind of made it a triple threat, because they didn't want, I think they didn't really want to have Kazarian lose in some ways. I think that they felt like, oh, maybe we're going to pull the trigger on Kazarian because it was in his hometown or whatever and that sort of thing. So, but then again, I still feel like you get the same feeling, because I think even in that match, Joe pinned Kazarian, didn't he? I don't remember now, but whatever. It doesn't really matter. Again, so, but still, I still don't know. It's really tough when you don't have clear singles rivalries for a clear singles champion. Same thing for tag team championships. You know, like, it sometimes when you have a multi-man match, it's clear, or it's somewhat clear sometimes, who's kind of going into in that or coming out of that sort of with the belt or with something, because it's like, this person has a story, that person has a story. Like, it's best when almost everyone has a story, but it is best when you've got two or three people with major stories, and it's like, okay, it's going to be this person or that person, and it's probably going to be this person, so that they can build to this person later on and do this and do that, you know. So, yeah, like, you've got to have that land of opportunity kind of thing where you give anyone and everyone an opportunity to come in and try to do their best job at, like, trying to get over and trying to do their shit. Like, there's, like, a few people that are on that roster that they're just kind of there, and I don't really see that they're really going anywhere. They're just kind of, like, spinning their wheels, and if they don't want to, you know, become the top guy, or they don't really want to get to that point, or whatever else it is, and they just want to collect the check, or just want to help the young guys get along, like JDC, Brian Myers, and a bunch of other guys like that, it just feels like, well, what are you guys doing? Like, you guys haven't really, you know, done anything, and it doesn't seem like you're gonna do anything. But you've been here for such a long time, but that now you're starting to become part of the furniture, which in some ways is good, because again, you know, you do fit in and you do the job and you do the work. but again, they can't be there forever. Like, they can't, like, I don't know how long any of them have got left in their career. They might surprise me, but again, same sort of thing. Those guys must be looking to retire soon, like in the next few years. Same with Eddie Edwards. He must be looking to think about retiring soon. Like, you just cannot go on, after a certain period of time and after so long. It's just, and after so many bumps and bruises and miles on the road and whatever else, it's like a very difficult chore. And like, I'm amazed at EY sometimes how he can still go, because like, and you have to give that guy props, in many ways, because again, he's still going at it and he's still doing, a fairly good job of going at it. So you can't say, oh, well, he doesn't deserve it, or he shouldn't be there, or whatever else. He 100% should be, because again, he's, putting in the effort and putting in the time, and, maybe he's not as good as what he once was, but again, like, that's not the point. 100%. The point is that he's there as a somewhat measuring stick and as somewhat proving stick for the other people that are there, and help get those other people over, and to, try and wrap his career up in the way that he wants. So, and to tell those stories, because those are the most important things. Again, even again, like, that's what I mean when people sort of say, oh, when was the last time TNA had a 6-star match, or whatever it is? It's like, dude, no one gives a shit. Like, what we care about is, the story. We want to see the story. People want to see that unpredictable sort of nature. They want to see, the grittiness, the roughness sometimes. They don't want to just see this overproduced, over corporate sort of thing. They want to see, the guys and the gals and whatever else that they think should be over. That's why people like really gravitated around guys like Daniel Bryan and things like that, because it was like, this is our guy. This is the guy we want, not, Roman Reigns or Batista or whoever else it was that was going to be shoved down our throats. And sometimes that sort of like, almost like, let's shove something down their throats just so that they'll get like something else over, perhaps is a good thing, because it's like, like, at least then we can kind of gauge, oh, they didn't really like that, but this is the person they want. Okay, thank you, crowd. Like, you've given us our story, and now we're like this. That's the one thing they should have done. Like, they should have said, it just brought it out plain and obvious that Roman was the chosen one. And now Daniel Bryan isn't, and now Vince McMahon's and now he's turned heel, and now he's aligned with Vince McMahon and all this sort of stuff, and now you're getting that going. Because now that person, is the villain anyway. So it starts becoming like, what do the crowd want? What don't they want? They don't want Roman Reigns, but they really want Daniel Bryan. Okay, let's make a story there. Let's put these two together, and I think they did it like years ago, or whatever it was. I think it was the second Royal Rumble where Reigns won when Daniel Bryan was in, but everyone was still chanting for Daniel Bryan. Was it at No Way Out? Not No Way Out. Elimination Chamber, I think it was, or maybe Fastlane or whatever it was. And they had Roman beat Bryan just because, like, they felt like, Roman's still our guy or whatever else, and we don't really care about D-Bry, that's a great place to turn somebody heel. I mean, it might not be the best, but again, you can still build it back up, sort of thing. You can get back to that point of saying, let's have these two pay off in like 6 months to a year's time, or whatever else it is. Let's have Roman win against, I don't know, whoever it was at WrestleMania, and then have him go on a big time heel reign for the next 6 months, 8 months, whatever it is, and then have Daniel Bryan finally come back and conquer him. you know, simple formula. Like, but that's what the crowd would have wanted. They didn't like Roman. They wanted Daniel. Well, they basically just loved Daniel Bryan so much. But again, they started having that problem of feeling like you're really forcing Reigns, like so much. And it's like, why are you giving us him when we don't really want him, type thing. So, but yeah, you need to gauge the difference between over pushing somebody. Like, if you're going to over push somebody, you need to over push them for a reason. You need to over push them so that you can see what the crowd's reaction is. If it's negative, they boo him. Okay, well, we'll turn him heel and we'll keep pushing him, but the crowd will be happy because he will be in the heel role, and this other person that they actually want will be in the babyface role, and we can push them both at the same time rather than just having John Cena here or whoever it is and being the top guy all the time. And that is one of the good things about having like a rotating roster of people coming in and coming out or whatever else it is. Sometimes it is beneficial because it's like, well, what if, Josh Alexander was still here? Maybe he'd be hogging up the main event. Maybe he wouldn't, but again, like, it might be a problem of saying, well, Kurt Angle was here for a long time, and yes, he certainly did deserve that top spot a lot of times, but he didn't deserve it all the time. You've got other guys that are there, and you should be, not just having them there, you should be having them going, okay, we actually beat Kurt Angle somehow, or whatever it was, or we beat Sting somehow, or we beat whoever it was somehow, some way, and now we're the top guy. We've got to be taken seriously. We've got to be pushed. We've got to get over, all of that. And some people aren't going to love that you beat Sting or you beat this person or you beat that person. Again, not every time it's going to be the young guy or the new guy or whatever else it is that's going to be getting over and the crowd's going to be happy with that. Sometimes they love Sting too much, or sometimes they love Kurt Angle too much, or think Kurt Angle's too great to, not ever be in that title picture again. But he doesn't need to be in there all the time again. You say, okay, let's bring him back in a few months' time, or let's bring him back in a year's time, or let's, use him really sparingly. Let's use him, in another role, put him in, let's make him in a tag team. Take the pressure off, like, and, he could still win the title here and there or whatever else it is. He could still have great feuds and great matches, but we need to slow down, Kurt, like, let's just do other things with you, you don't have to do it all, you don't have to be the flag bearer for the company all the time. We need you to help us with some of these young kids and showing them how to be the flag bearer for us, like down the road, not just like, let's bring in all these ex-WWE guys for no real reason and bloat our roster and then be like, oh, what are we going to do with all these guys? And what are we going to do with half of our roster, the other half of our roster that's been here since the beginning and now doesn't have hardly any TV time? Like, you need to have a bit of both. You can't just say, oh, well, we're going to have all these new young guys. Where are they going to build their legitimacy from? You've got to have some old-time legends or whatever else it is for that. And again, same thing. Where's their drawing power? They don't have a whole lot. So they've got to beat established stars. They've got to beat established legends, and they've got to connect. So it's not as simple as saying, give people opportunity. You need to plan and say, okay, how are we giving them this opportunity? But you also need to be kind of hands off. You kind of need to be like, okay, did that work? Yes or no? Like, objectively, the crowd is the ultimate decider. Always listen to the crowd. The crowd will tell you what to do all the time. You need to be listening to them. So you cannot get away from what they want. Even if you say, okay, we're going to give it to him, and we're going to give it to him in a few months. Okay, now how are we going to do that? You know what I mean? Not just, we're going to give it to him at some point when we don't know. Okay, we know we're going to give it to him here, and this is why. This is how we're going to do it. This is the story to do it with.
This is where we're at. This is why, etc. So, yeah, guys, I think you guys get it. But I do love to talk about some of these things because it is an interesting sort of subject to kind of talk about and sort of go through. You guys can obviously let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. I hope you've enjoyed this one, and I hope you'll join me again in another one.